Bad Weapon Academy Ambassador, please. I don't know if you take requests, but I would like to see an episode on the
You
Ambassador.
should probably add weapons
I'd
like
add the Ambassador, maybe? Bad Weapon
I don't know,
Academy.
all
Do the Ambi.
no, really,
pulls. It's that bad. No. No. Why would I do that? It's really not even that bad. You want a bad weapon? You got this piece of shit. Welcome to Bad Weapon Academy, where we take a look at the worst weapons TF2 has to offer, and I show you how to best utilize them. Something a few of you have picked up on in the primary weapon episode so far is that secondaries are really important. Whether it's to provide some kind of passive benefit or else cover a weakness of the weapon or class, your backup tool can mean just as much, if not more, than what you're usually gunning people down with. But what happens when the support tool itself is bad? If it has nothing to prop itself up, how can it even function? Enter the red tape recorder. The only unlockable Sapper in the game, and not a very good one either. The Sapper itself has an interesting role because it's not the best sentry destroying tool out there. It's loud, the engineer is alerted to it immediately, and it can be taken care of in a couple of wrench swings. This has never stopped pub players from stacking Spy once they get into a server with multiple engineers because, hey, Spy is an anti-sentry gun class, right? He has the only tool in the game specifically meant to destroy engineer buildings, so he's one of, if not the best at it, right? Well, if the engineer is already dead, maybe, but where the Sapper works best is in conjunction with your fellow teammates. If you sap a sentry at the same time as a power class like a soldier or demo or heavy pushes into it, that's it. The sentry is screwed. No wrangler or rescue ranger can save it. You force the engineer to get up close to his sentry, a bad idea where splash damage is concerned, and instead of healing or tanking his sentry, he's forced to remove the Sapper, wasting precious time as his gun is mowed down. He can either save his sentry at risk to himself, or sacrifice it so he can live to fight another day, but he'll likely be giving your team the advantage of not having to fight an auto-aim high DPS machine in the process. So while the Sapper can destroy sentries, I don't think that's its intended purpose. It's more of a sentry disabler. There's a reason that even assisted building destructions count towards your stranges. So how does the red tape recorder factor in here? Well, it's slow. A hell of a lot slower actually. Looking at the stats won't take long as it only has 2. It has a 100% Sapper damage penalty which applies to all buildings. So it takes about twice as long to destroy buildings compared to the regular Sapper. What takes the Sapper 8 seconds to do, it takes the red tape recorder about 17.5. However, before it starts damaging buildings, it deconstructs them, lowering their level, which takes about 3.5 seconds per level. This is meant to be an upside, but it's really not. Any engineer close to their sentry will just whack it off before it even gets a chance to lower its level. 3.5 seconds is a long time in TF2. If you're using it purely for the purpose of sentry destruction, it's just no good, it's way too slow. And if you're using it with your teammates, the regular Sapper just does the job better. It takes 3.5 seconds for the red tape recorder to get a sentry down to level 2. Then it starts having lower health, and it can be 2-shot by 2 direct pipes or rockets from any rocket launcher besides the Liberty launcher or the direct hit, since the direct hit is able to 2-shot even level 3 sentries. In 3.5 seconds, a regular Sapper can take a sentry down to almost half its health. No matter how you slice it, this is a downgrade. Everything the red tape recorder can do, the stock Sapper does better. There's no reason to use it, right? Well, the good thing about something as specialized as a Sapper is that it's meant specifically to target one class, or more specifically, the buildings of one class. So you just have to look at that class's arsenal of weapons to see in what situations the downside actually becomes an upside. because believe it or not, sometimes destroying a sentry slowly can be a good thing rather than a bad thing. Now let's be clear on something. You should not run the red tape recorder right out of the gate. Just don't do it. Instead, you need to use your class's superior powers of observation to be on the lookout for certain types of engineers. And when you see them, that's the moment to equip it and strike. The first and most obvious kind of engineer is the Gunslinger engineer, also known as the Battle Engie. Battle Engies typically like to treat their mini-sentries as disposable means of dealing extra damage to targets they're firing out with their shotgun. It effectively doubles the damage they can put out and increases their longevity by forcing their enemies into what are essentially 2v1 battles where one opponent has perfect aim. It's an extremely effective and sometimes annoying strategy, but one that you can pop a hole in thanks to just how slow your Sapper destroys buildings. Because they're disposable, if a mini-sentry starts going down, the Battle Engie will usually just let it. Once the fight is done, it's as simple a matter as 2 clicks to get another one right back up. But when the gun going down takes 10.5 entire seconds, well, suddenly the Battle Engie just becomes a slower scout with a weaker scattergun and 25 more health. He's forced to either spend time waiting on his gun to go down and be left extremely vulnerable in the meantime, or he's forced to spend time removing the Sapper, which can leave him open to an ambush. You can be a real nuisance to battle engineers this way. However, it's important to note that the farther away the engineer is from his mini-sentry, the better this will work out. If he's right next to it, then he'll just take it off immediately. Once there's some distance between him and his gun, you force him into a choice. Either his gun stays up and he maintains a degree of safety with auto-aim at the risk of being extremely vulnerable while saving it, or he can sacrifice the gun and rely solely on his shotgun aim for a significant period of time. Speaking of Battle Engineer, let's talk about a common shotgun that's often paired with it, the Frontier Justice. This gun is a scary thing to fight. You've got the sentry down, you think the battle's over, and then BAM! You're one shot out of nowhere by none other than the very engineer you just took for helpless a moment ago. But what happens when that sentry gun that's been racking up kills suddenly starts going down painfully slowly? It defeats the entire purpose of the gun because the engineer now has to wait for his gun to go down in order to get the benefit. And all the while he's left with half a clip of shotgun ammo and no sentry to back him up. This is especially effective on engineers who use leveled sentries in conjunction with the Frontier Justice, since it'll take even longer for the gun to go down. If you communicate with your teammates, this can be especially devastating as you can instruct them to not destroy it until the engineer is taken care of, removing the risk of getting one-shot by his crits and wasting those sentry kills. It's almost evil. While on the subject of shotguns, easily the most detrimental one you can use the red tape recorder against is the Widowmaker. Because the Widowmaker uses metal for ammo, this is actually the best possible situation for the deconstruction mechanic, because it means that the engineer will have to turn his means of self-defense into repairs. This can be especially effective on his teleporter, as it's such a high priority building, but one the engineer will rarely be too close to, meaning you'll actually be able to get the full benefit of being able to deconstruct it and leave the enemy team scrambling around a level 1 teleporter. And I don't have to tell you, that can sometimes be slower than walking. The last type of engineer to talk about is one you won't see too often, but one that I like to call the Long Ranger. Leveled sentry engineers like to stick around their sentries more often than not, which isn't the best for the red tape recorder. It's really weak against turtling Engies. But every so often, you'll see one who prefers to hide behind cover and heal it exclusively with a rescue ranger. These guys are just as easily countered by a regular Sapper, but because they're stationed further away from their sentry guns than the average Engie, you're able to make use of the deconstruction mechanic. Suddenly, that engineer went from tanking a level 3 sentry in relative safety to annoyingly having to upgrade a level 2. And that is the perfect moment for your team to strike, as they can take out both the sentry and the engineer. If you want to make the most out of your potential annoyance, I'd recommend using the Invisibility Watch or Cloak and Dagger to get the most ambush opportunities possible at the best possible times. However, one of the nice things about the red tape recorder is that I really don't have to go into loadouts too much because it doesn't really have bad synergy with any of Spy's other weapons. Except the Your Eternal Reward, but that's just because that already sucks. The situations where this Sapper works are niche, but they do exist. It's not as useless as people make it out to be. and in the right situation, it can even be more effective than the regular Sapper. If you want to maximize your chances of this weapon being useful, then King of the Hill and Payload Defense are probably your best bets. Since these situations are where engineers like to run mini-sentries the most often, or at the very least, where they'll be aggressive enough to stay further away from their buildings. And I think your scouts in particular will thank you on Koth matches for making gunslinger engineer lives hell. In the situations where this Sapper works, it works pretty well. But I think more than any other episode in the series so far, this is the one where I said, God, I wish I was using stock the most often while gathering footage for it. So how can we fix that? Well, the high GPS balance mod made it so that you can throw it like the spy does in Meet the Spy. That certainly gives it utility. However, if we really want to get the most out of the deconstruction idea, then I say either make the deconstruction happen faster, as in less than 3.5 seconds, or make the Sapper itself bulkier so that it has time to get the building down before it's destroyed. Not enough so that it's a sure thing that the engineer won't be able to stop it from being de-leveled, but enough so that if you time it right, it's a lot more effective. This would be especially effective for JAG engineers who would have to hit it several times before it gets destroyed. I think this would be the best way to make it have more general application without taking away the supposed downside that gives it a viable niche. I like the fact that sometimes you have to think a bit differently while using this thing, and it's not just effectively a Sapper reskin that you play the exact same way with. Now, if you want it to be a Sapper reskin and really want to use it at its most effective, then just play MVM where it is literally a reskin of the stock Sapper. I mean, you'll get kicked for playing Spy anyway unless it's a couple rounds of Expert, but you'll be able to definitively say that your red tape recorder is just as good as stock. But again, the entire point of this is so that you're not just using a glorified reskin of stock. Some weapons in the game kind of give that impression. Like, how differently do you play Demo Man with the Iron Bomber as opposed to stock? Or the Hitman's Heatmaker with Sniper? The red tape recorder does the same thing as the regular Sapper, but it specializes in screwing over certain kinds of engineers. So go out there and find those Frontier Justice gunslinger engineers and tell them Fish sent you.